Hello, everyone, and welcome to our online lecture for today, Thursday. Today, we're going to talk about identifying sponsor needs. I'm going to try to go through this as quick as I can because I know online lectures can get kind of long and it's not fun to listen to a recording. A few reminders: you do have a quiz due Sunday, an in-class activity due tonight at 11:59 p.m., and a reminder that we will not be meeting in class next Thursday. So, when we're talking about sponsor identity, we already know that sponsorship is based on exchange theory. Sponsorships are business decisions, and because of that, they need to go through the same kind of thought process as any other business decision. So, profits and loss needs to be taken into account. As we talked about earlier in the semester, corporate bosses have to justify why they are becoming a sponsor for something. They have to justify it to their shareholders. They can no longer just say, I want to sponsor golf because I like golf. It has to match up with their shareholders' likes. Sponsorship should ultimately match the demographic and psychographic targets of the product or team or organization's audience. It should reach appropriate decision makers and move products and services. Ultimately, sponsors are trying to sell their own product, right? So, what are some things that sponsors take into consideration when they are considering being a sponsor? Well, how can they use the logo of the team? How can they access, or what kind of access do they get to exclusive content? Um, do they have exclusivity within the category? Like we talked about with Raising Cane's and the chicken restaurants in Lawrence, I think KU already has quite a few sponsorships from chicken restaurants. So it's likely that we won't see others join. Does the organization use social media? Are they able to be an official product sponsor of something like the headsets of our football coaches and Raising Cane's? What is the fit between the team's image and the product image? This is something with KU basketball that we've talked about a little bit. You know, the perception of KU basketball outside of our area probably might not be great right now due to the NCAA allegations and the fight and Snoop Dogg. So how does that image align with our sponsors and our product's image? Does it reflect what the product is trying to reflect as well? Target market fit, which relates to kind of the demographic profile of the audience, and does the product, is it something that the audience of the event or team would want to use? And then, is there opportunity for signage? Where will the sponsor be shown? So we're going to go into detail on a couple of these. In terms of demographic fit, I have some examples here, right? We have esports. So esports sponsors typically want to be or know they'll be viewed by tech-savvy individuals, and the kind of demographic base is 12 to 25-year-olds. So you're probably going to see a lot of technological sponsors, electronic goods sponsors, and so forth. People who sponsor, or organizations that sponsor golf. Typically, are organizations are companies that have products that are sought out by high income demographics. So Rolex or Charles Schwab. And then with professional sports, I just thought this was interesting. 30% of the fan base for professional sports teams typically are female. So these sponsors cannot solely market to one gender or the other. They do need to take in account both genders when they are marketing a product. Moving on to psychographic fit, we want to understand the attitudes, beliefs, and feelings of the consumers of the product or of the sporting event. Right. So, for instance, NASCAR used to be sponsored by the armed forces. Why is that? Because NASCAR fans are known to be quite patriotic, right? Another example, small Nebraska athletics, or even I think Nebraska, sponsored by John Deere. Why is that? Because a lot of their demographic really values farming, right? It's part of the community. Moving on to awareness objectives. Sponsors want to know what kind of exposure they'll get. Social media does the team or organization use social media? Where will their logo be placed? How often will ads be read? And then ultimately, they want to know the opportunity for global influence or awareness. This is especially true for our bigger market sporting events and organizations. We see these professional teams going overseas to play games, right? That provides an opportunity for global awareness of their sponsors. We also want to take into consideration image objectives. How does what the sponsor is sponsoring affect the brand's image? So, an example from the textbook. We typically don't see Wrangler sponsoring yachting events, right? They're sponsoring maybe rodeo events because it fits in with the image of the brand. Another example, Nike and Kaepernick. We saw this ad come out last year. Believe in something even if it means sacrificing everything. Nike is a proud sponsor of Colin Kaepernick. And why is that? Because the image of their organization aligns with what, or the image of their company aligns with what Kaepernick is standing for. Sales objectives. Ultimately, sponsors want to increase sales level of their brand. And they might do this by getting people to sample the product. The textbook talks about Coors, how it only is wanting to sponsor events or sporting teams or so forth that sell beer. It makes no sense for them to sponsor a youth baseball tournament, right? Unless they're serving alcohol there for the parents, because that doesn't really allow them to increase their sales. In terms of sampling the product, the textbook talks about how Johnson & Johnson sunscreen, the company Johnson & Johnson, provided sunscreen samples at 2,000 youth swim meets. This allowed people to sample the product on site and hopefully purchase it in the future. And then, of course, we have hospitality objectives. And sporting events are perfect for hospitality objectives or sporting teams or organizations. They can provide corporate suites. They can provide tickets, access to tickets. And on non-event days, they can even provide tours for employees or meet and greet with the team. Hospitality perks and objectives are a big part of sponsorship. And then the textbook talks about several others. You can look at this on page 47 of your text, but they might include season tickets, reserve tickets, special stadium nights, exposure via the PA system, how often will their ads be read, participation in events, and so forth. And then finally, I just want to talk about a few examples of trends in sponsorship. So these are things we see occurring within sponsorship. We might see activation. Activation is basically a way for sponsors to motivate consumers to interact with the product. We might see this through a sweepstakes, a register to win this this truck or this four-wheeler, and it allows the people who are in attendance to touch or use the product. Another example is GoPro was a sponsor for Missy Franklin, the Olympic athlete, and they had Missy record her training by the use of a GoPro while she was training for the Olympics, and then published that footage. And so that was another way of activating the actual product. We might see cross promotion where we have sponsors working together to sponsor a team sport or event. You might see a restaurant and an apparel store working together and have a cross promotion. And then we have cause-related sponsorship. This is when you see sponsors wanting to get involved because of a good cause. A couple examples: ESPN's Jimmy V Week, the Komen Race for the Cure, Make-A-Wish Foundation. Anytime you see a sponsor there, they're concerned with being related with a good cause. And then finally, we have grassroots initiatives. This is where they're focusing on smaller communities, not your big cities. My example for this one, a couple years back in Nebraska, Pepsi held a country concert. And I can't remember the artist, but it was a super small town of like 300 people. And literally everyone in the town went to the concert, and Pepsi recorded a commercial there. So, wrapping up, this is your ICA for today. It can be found under assignments on Blackboard. I want you to pick a team, sporting event, any of those, an athlete, whatever you prefer, and then pick a sponsor of your choice. Then I want you to identify the demographics and psychographics of your team, athlete, or sport, or sporting event, sorry. And after you do that, I want you to address the different things that we talked about, including the awareness, image, sales, and hospitality objectives that you would portray to the sponsor if you were the organization. And then finally, pick one of the 4 trends we discussed and talk about how maybe that could be incorporated in the sponsorship. Only need half a page to a page on this. And again, you can submit it on Blackboard under assignments. And don't forget about your quiz. And I'm excited to see you all again on Tuesday.